Okay, let's do it.
Tuesday. We'll be right back. All right. Yeah, by the way, we got the trailer to David's movie.
My nose
right now.
is going to
check
be
it
all
go
red
right
if
now.
I
Anatomy
blow
of a
it.
Great-
It's like
My awakening began with a simple question. It occurred when I saw a familiar clip showing President Bush on the morning of 9/11. I put almost no thought into the particulars of that day for 10 years, but that was about to change.
Fires in high-rises have never brought down a steel frame high-rise building.
It sure looked like a controlled demolition, in retrospect. I couldn't stop at this point. I needed to know more. Of all the 9/11 information I've come across, this may have been the easiest to spot, and yet it provided me with one of those stark moments in which the reality of 9/11 sunk in. Researching late every night was starting to disrupt my home life. My wife didn't exactly see eye to eye with me about 9/11. Back then, she still believed the official version. But more astonishing is there's no mention of Stratosec or Securicom in the entire 567-page 9/11 Commission report. Of course, that was no surprise by now. Did I forget to mention that the same 9/11 Commission did not mention Building 7 a single time in the entire report either?
The flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
How does he get nanothermite? How does he get NORAD, the FAA, and our air defenses to look the other way? Or get access to the interior of all 3 towers? Or get 19 guys to kill themselves? Or get NIST and the 9/11 Commission to tank their investigations? Or keep the media quiet? Spawning even more questions and fueling the early stages of what would become my spiritual awakening. Practicing.
one. Hey, we're back.
We are back right now with movie producer David Hooper. Thanks for coming on,
Yeah.
man.
I'm with the J's.
You're with the J's.
J and V.
J's and the V's. The V's and the
VJ,
J's.
KJ. It's easy to remember.
VJs. So you're the man behind Cave Radio show Down the Rabbit Hole, and we talked to David earlier. It's like David and David is how nice. And when did you start the Down the Rabbit Hole show?
I was being interviewed on a bunch of radio shows for the movie, and it just was resonating well. And the funny thing is, Dave, who you just had on, I met at the premiere of my film at the Fillmore. And yeah, I don't want to say anything I'm not supposed to, Dave, but he went through like a massive tragedy right after, and we actually became really good friends. One thing led to another, and he said it really well. We do a show where we talk about the things that you kind of want to talk about at parties or that you think about, but you don't really do it.
You don't want to bring up religion, or you don't want to bring up like politics.
Yeah, I mean, this is about
you do, but you don't.
the universe, quantum physics, demons, angels, aliens. You know,
Oh God, I love it.
There are things going on there, and it's really kind of where science, history meet the Bible, because at the end of the day, you know, it's funny, you guys were the first television show that I did before, right before our premiere, and you know, over time, investigating 9/11 led me to understand that there's an organized evil out there, the kind that can only exist if there's a God and if the Bible is true, and it's really more of a science show, if you ask me, but...
Now, we did come into your segment here with a snippet of your movie, The Anatomy of a Great Deception. And the one thing that really kind of stood out with me is like, you were just an average guy that really bought what the government was telling you. And now you really switched your entire life over the situation, going as far as to produce a movie about it.
Yeah, well, 9/11, by the time I produced The Anatomy of a Great Deception, I was personally way beyond what 9/11 meant. And yeah, I was a regular guy.
I don't mean that, as an insult, but...
No, whatever that is,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think I would have been in that category of regular. My son was going to be born in a couple of months, and I just started with a question that it just stumbled onto it by accident one day when I was watching a clip on CNN where George Bush is sitting in this classroom with his book upside down.
Yeah.
And Andrew Card walks up to him and whispers, "A second plane has hit the second building. We're under attack."
Right.
And he's left in this school, which was on his calendar for 3 days, and as many as a dozen planes were thought to be hijacked. And I just thought it was odd that the Secret Service would leave him there.
Right.
So I went looking for an answer. Now, I never found a good, plausible answer. The best one I found was they didn't want to alarm the kids at the school,
Right.
which is laughable because these kids practice fire drills all the time, and literally the balance of power in the world is at stake here. And this president sat there for 35 minutes, not knowing if some hijacker decided to get ambitious and, hey, why don't we just fly into a school? That's a much easier target than trying to whiz through buildings.
Right.
And one thing led to another. I started to investigate who really financed it, who was really behind it. And at the end of the day, this was 11 months of full-time research, but I basically found God because I found the evil that God warned us about. This is so far from the kind of person I was a few years ago, now 7 years ago. And, there's a big difference when you go from considering to wondering to knowing. Because when you know, that kind of changes your life a little bit. And so...
There you go. Perfect.
Hold on, let us
Better?
touch you.
Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta touch you too.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, I've went down that rabbit hole myself.
it sounds like what you were saying off camera, you've done some...
Well, it's like you hit one thing on YouTube, and then you just start going down the YouTube rabbit hole, literally, and you find the one thing and one thing and one thing, and you'd be surprised the shit you learn. And
Now, let me ask you, though, when you're out there
people
on
think
YouTube,
you're crazy when you start talking to them about the stuff
yeah,
you
but
know,
you
too.
think a lot of it might be even kind of like made up and stuff like that, or you think a lot of it is more true?
There's a lot of truth to a lot of things, but you have to do a lot of research to come to it, I would say,
I'll say it like this. We're literally up against the greatest deceiver known in human history.
And who is that?
The devil himself, Satan.
Okay.
I'm betting my life on it at this point. And 9/11 at the end of the day was just a small little operation that is put on by this very amoeba-like, ambiguous network of you mentioned a bunch of them, the Masons, the Bilderbergs,
the pedophiles in Hollywood.
And that's actually even bigger than what...
Right.
So
they're doing like sacrifices and stuff.
This is actually much more common than you think.
I know.
This is going on in everyone's hometown.
Yeah.
And there's two realities in the world. There's what is portrayed on mainstream media,
that most people believe,
which is
candy fed.
Absolutely. It's hard for people to understand this until you go look behind the curtain, but it's absolutely bullshit. Total bullshit. And the other reality is it's the millions of stories from people that were on the inside of these events, whether it be 9/11 or Sandy Hook or Bilderberg insiders that have defected or Illuminati family members that, they leave their families and say, look, man, I swear to God, these people praise Lucifer, we sacrifice children. And it took me a few times of listening to these testimonies and interviewing some of these guys where it finally hit me, wait a minute, they're not crazy, everyone else is brainwashed.
God bless Corey Feldman.
He was right.
I know.
Without a doubt, he was right.
So let me ask you, I got two questions. One, what happened to all the passengers on the plane, do you think?
Okay, so I don't know. This I don't know.
This is the only little question I've always wondered.
Look, this is scary stuff. Like, you want to know?
Well, yeah, they just killed 3,000 people in a building, so they have no problem with taking...
So you got to understand, the people we're talking about have no problem murdering 3,000 people.
Right.
So this is a personal theory, but if you talk to the air traffic controllers that were working at Cleveland Airport that particular day, the two flights out of Boston landed at Cleveland, everyone was deplaned, and they walked into a NASA hangar. And by the way, NASA is nothing more than a studio. It exists to change our view of what the world and the universe is. It is, in fact, NASA in Hebrew means to deceive, by the way.
Oh, wow.
So what's scary is everyone saw all of these people deplane. Of course, you'll never hear this on the news. And these people were never heard from again. And I suspect they were probably just assassinated.
That's what I was thinking. That's the only thing that I could actually...
And that happens more than you could ever imagine. But if Anderson Cooper doesn't tell us that, then
we don't believe
it's hard for your average housewife.
I actually think that the hijackers that were involved with supposedly hitting the building, those are the ones that flew the planes and they assassinated.
If you're good, at one time I was a real expert on 9/11. Since then, that's been a few years, and we're working on 2 new films at the moment. I heavily doubt those hijackers were on any of those planes at all. The BBC came out with a number of news agencies, actually. The BBC is a known name. I mean, that's something we all recognize. And a few of their reporters went finding the families of the hijackers in Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East.
And they showed up, some of them showed up alive.
Half of them were still alive. I just talked to my son this morning. He's fine. And one of them was surprised. His face was all over the news as one of the hijackers. And he's like, I'm a taxi driver. And it was such a completely fabricated... It's what Goebbels said in Germany before World War. If you tell a lie big enough, the bigger you tell it, the easier it is for people to believe it. Lie big, and the masses will follow. And that literally is happening in this country.
Well, here's the great thing about that in a sense, too. If you question it, then you're thought of as a lunatic.
So you mentioned Cat Williams earlier.
Now
here's what's
well, he knows because he knows he's been called a lunatic.
Look, I'll tell you this: if you don't want to be
it.
criticized, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. I had one of my coaches told me that when I was young, and it's very true. But Cat Williams is a guy that absolutely understands what kind of evil we're up against. And it is no accident whatsoever that the people that speak out about it, the Charlie Sheens, the Cat Williams, the Rosie O'Donnells, when you think of those names, you think, oh, they're a little imbalanced, they're a little off. By design.
I don't. I gravitate towards people like that.
It's weird. I mean, that might be talking about the spirit that's in you, where you're listening and you're open-minded. But the design by the mainstream media, which at the end of the day is controlled by just a small little handful of people, just a few. And when, I've been the CEO of a few companies, you can control hundreds of people underneath you. They don't even know you're controlling them. Just by something you say to your vice president, they make it happen. And they form a lot of the opinions that we have about. And Cat Williams is a guy that he is maligned specifically because he speaks out against the Illuminati. I mean, this is... Jesus Christ called the Illuminati. If you trace them back through time, in the 60s they were called the establishment. We sometimes call them the 1%.
And now all these really popular celebrities are throwing these Illuminati signs, and if you watch their music videos and you slow them down, you'll see them throwing signs, and there's all these little bits and pieces, and
It's hard to tell who's just copying, LeBron James, and who's really doing it, because these secret societies is kind of a recruiting for the dark side of this world, and you're making.
How many children Beyonce and Jay-Z ate or murdered or whatever, because they're so famous and they're so Illuminati too,
Well, the devil requires child sacrifice. Do a little math, and I live in a town where there's about 10,000 people. There have probably been 3 or 4 tragic child deaths in my lifetime. But you go look through Hollywood, how many families have lost a child? I mean, the numbers, it's staggering. It's like 20,000% higher than the average. So there's something going on there, without a doubt. And it is hard to get your face on television and mainstream media unless you are down with these guys.
Right.
But evil's not the only force at work in this world. There's also good too. So
that's where you're at. So we could talk for hours, obviously.
I
on
know.
this whole
I'm so excited.
subject.
I'm excited to see the movie now. How can I see this movie?
Well, yeah, exactly.
all right, I'll give you two options.
Okay.
One is the preferable, and then I'll give you the easy one.
Okay.
But you can go order the DVD at agdmovie.com, Anatomy of a Great Deception, agdmovie.com. Or frankly, if you go on YouTube, it's all over the place.
Okay.
You'll find it.
And now you've got another movie coming out. When do you think that's going to come out? And what's that going to really focus on? I mean, my whole thing was really, at the end of the day, you got the two buildings, they fell. Everybody's going to believe the planes, but at the end of the day, you have Building 7 that wasn't hit by a plane.
Building 7's a smoking gun.
Yeah.
If you're going to do one thing, find
Building
out what
7.
happened to Building 7.
Yeah.
And unless you are completely a zombie, you will,
How many people knew about Building 7 on 9/11? Did you guys know about Building 7? There was 3 buildings. Anybody know about that? You guys know about that? You know about Building 7? Yeah, look up Building 7. It wasn't hit by a plane. Looked like it kind of came down with some demolition.
And now we're starting to get deathbed confessions from former CIA agents that said, look, I wired up the building. I was part of the team that did it.
Well, I mean, there's no way that a plane, like the steel of a plane, cannot slice through the steel of a building such as that. I mean, just
It's like a bullet hitting a big oak tree. And the tree's not going to collapse in on itself and turn to dust. It's physically impossible.
Right.
So many laws of physics were broken that day.
I know, because a plane, I'm getting caught up here. A plane's, like the wings wouldn't slice. It just wouldn't happen that way.
And jet fuel is kerosene, which doesn't even really burn very hotly.
Right.
And so somehow this was attributed to melting steel. It's just, it's a laughable story. That
well, see what I actually learned from things that happen around here too. Like a plane hit a bridge here in Detroit many years ago, and the bridge was still up and running the following day. You've seen luggage, you've seen plane parts.
The one where the one girl,
yeah,
the one
little
girl
alive, she lived.
Oh, Cecilia Sheehan.
Yeah, they hit the 94 bridge coming over.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Or they didn't make it over, or one of the two. But yeah, it was right there. You could see the bridge looked like it was. I mean, and if you look also at a lot of plane, when they crash and stuff like that, there's very little fire because it all explodes like a car. If it blows up in an auto race, you just
we saw most of the fuel burn up right
there.
And then you got black smoke coming out of the buildings, which means it's a low temp. It's something worth looking into because.
What about that smoking hole in Pennsylvania with no debris in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah,
the planes disappeared at the Pentagon and at Shanksville.
And then
the whole story is a joke.
All the black boxes are gone. Oh, and I love this one. Here's the one that I love the most. Is a plane, it flies down, it not only hits light poles on the way into the Pentagon, which obviously once you hit birds or light poles, the plane is gonna, fly out of course and hit the ground right there. But ironically that day, it not only hit post, but it kept flying along the way and hit the Pentagon after it flew around the Pentagon and came back.
And all these disasters that happen on the news and whatnot, there's that one lady that's in the crying lady that's in every single story. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, crisis actors, actually. In fact, one of the guys that was interviewed for 9/11, who's like, the buildings were burning and they fell down.
Yeah.
He was also a witness at the LAX shooting 10 years later.
Yeah.
And they cycle these guys.
They do.
Well, yeah, because they're secret. They know all the secrets.
We gotta wrap it up.
We do.
They're throwing stuff at us. They're like literally throwing stuff at us.
Here.
Oh my God! I know. I get tired.
By the way, I got T-shirts for all your guests on that chair. You guys help yourselves.
Wake up.
Cool.
We got T-shirts and we got a book.
Yeah.
Let's open the book real quick. The book.
So the 401 book's coming out. This is what I spent the last couple years. It's supposed to be 3 months. It turned out to be a lot longer. This is 2,000 quotes from history that will help you follow the footprints of evil, how it has gotten to this point.
Okay.
And these are from credible people. These are from presidents, reporters, Carl Bernstein, Solzhenitsyn, you name it. 1,800 quotes, the 401 book. It'll be, it's being published as we speak, but you can order copy orders at, I think the 401book.com, I think.
I think.
But I'm not in charge of those big decisions.
Just Google his name and you
David
can
Hooper's
find it
over
all.
there at Cave Radio. Once again, say it again, the digits, so we know how to find you guys.
CRB Radio, and then our show, it's buried somewhere in the annals of Cave Radio. It's called Down the Rabbit Hole.
There you go.
Yes, thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having me. You guys are great. I love you guys.
We're going to get out of here. We're going to be right back with our live musical guest tonight. Mr. Jeff Hoagland is in the house. Coming up right after